Hello and welcome to Strategic Compass. Today we are hosting Mr. Ambassador Ramzy Ezzeldin Ramzy. Ambassador Ramzy was the former Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Egypt. He was at one stage Assistant Secretary of the United Nations. And he is one of the most senior diplomats in the entire region and never retired. He's been quite active reading and writing about what's going on at a regional as well as global level. He writes articles and participates in international conferences like WALDA in particular, and then expresses his opinions, which is always very straightforward and also mind-broadening. Mr. Ambassador, welcome to our talk.
Thank you for having me again, Professor Ünal.
Well, that's our pleasure. It was our pleasure. And today, again, it's always nice to talk to you about regional and international matters. Now, let's start with Egypt's position to what is going on in Gaza. Egypt, right from the beginning, has been very critical, as everybody else, of what Israel has been up to. But Egypt also rejected Trump's proposal to basically ethnically cleanse the whole of Gaza, turn the whole region into a Riviera. Then Egypt's position doesn't seem to have changed by now. So would you basically comment on that first?
Of course. Well, of course, Egypt's position since the Gaza crisis erupted almost a year and a half ago has not changed. We have been consistent. We have been very clear that we will refuse any displacement of Palestinians from Gaza. That is, for us, it's a red line. That will not be acceptable. Second, we have always maintained that Gaza and the West Bank are one unit. Any attempt to divide them is, again, unacceptable to us. Within that context, we have done everything possible to ensure that the Palestinian people remain on their land. Any attempt to, whatever pretext that can be used, to ease them out, using it very diplomatically, is not going to be acceptable to us. Certainly we're not going, and within that context, we have always said that we will not accept Palestinians moving into Egyptian territory and Sinai. We have always supported the Palestinians, but we are not going to be party to any scheme that is aimed at liquidating the Palestinian problem. Palestinians have to stay on their land regardless of what happens. And that is, again, if I could take it a step further, and that is why we have put forward our plan, which is reconstruction of Gaza with the Palestinians in Gaza. And we have presented a very detailed plan. It has received almost universal support. And we are hoping that this is the choice that ultimately will be implemented.
Okay, so on the question, on your phrase, whatever the pretext can be used part, I'm interested a bit. The Hamas pretext doesn't seem to hold water for what they want to do, does it, anymore? I mean, not even from the right beginning. Okay, there is Hamas, and Hamas is considered to be a terrorist organization in the West in general. It is not in good terms with Arab countries, particularly in Egypt and all that. But at the same time, all the Palestinians cannot be eradicated because of using that pretext. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree essentially with what you said. I mean, regardless of what your political position on Hamas is, at the end of the day, Hamas is engaged in a struggle against occupation. And it is very sad what has happened to the Gazans as a result of what happened on October 7th. But the one really responsible for that is the Israelis and Israeli occupation and their retaliation to whatever happened on October 7th. So, but Hamas, I mean, we have our differences with Hamas, as you know, but we are in contact with them and we are negotiating with them. And I think they have been, I would say, forthcoming on a number of issues. And as you know, the negotiations are still ongoing. And we are hopeful that at the end of the day, they will put Palestinian interests and the interests of the Palestinian people ahead of their own narrow interests. And that is what we are trying to help them do.
And regarding Trump's proposal of emptying Gaza of the Palestinians, now Egypt came out on a rock-solid ground and made its counter-arguments and said no quite clearly. And at the time, it seemed as if Jordan was sort of vacillating a bit, you know, fluctuating its position, but they also rejected the proposal. Now, have these rejections by major Arab countries like Egypt, Jordan, particularly these were the twos who were, according to Trump's proposal, going to take all these Palestinian population into their lands. Do you think Trump's position is at least going through some changes?
Well, I mean, quite frankly, when you look at the present U.S. administration's policies, not only on Gaza or the Middle East in general, but in the world, you see a lot of vacillation back and forth depending on the pushback. So I think initially he sort of pulled back from his plan. He said, you know, it was just a suggestion and so forth. But unfortunately now we hear again, this talk is revived. We see Israeli policies which are clearly aimed at emptying Gaza of the Palestinians, finding some support in the United States administration, which is most unfortunate. But, you know, we count on our relationship with the United States. As you know, it's a long-term relationship. We have common interests. And we're hoping that the United States will ultimately listen to what we are saying and do what is right. What is right is to be on the side of justice. The side of justice means the Palestinians have the right to their state, and ultimately this will just have to be the case. Otherwise, the genocide that is being committed in Gaza will go down in history as not only an Israeli act, but it will also be attributed to those who support it.
Oh, there is no question about that. You know, all those countries who continue to supply Israel, particularly with military weapons and ammunition and all that, the Europeans, they are all going to be held accountable for what they are doing now at some stage in history, you know, in the years to come. There's no question about that. So I hope, we all hope, you know, some of them at least will have to stand trial one way or the other. Now, about the Palestinians and their entitlement to their own state, what is the situation? You know, what is the general feeling among all the Arab states? You know, they used to support it, but there is, for instance, in a country like Turkey, the oft-reiterated argument among the public is that, you know, the Arabs are not reacting to what Israel is doing in Gaza so much, and they have forgotten about the Palestinians. That is not correct. All the Arab countries are doing what they can, diplomatically and politically, What would you say on that? What would be your take?
Well, I can say one thing is that in terms of their political positions, there is no change. There is steadfast support for the Palestinians to establish their own state on 1967 borders. There's no doubt about that. Now, I think you are correct in saying that there is criticism that the Arabs are not doing enough. And here I may not necessarily disagree with you. I think they can do more and they should do more. The issue is how to do it. It's something that requires, unfortunately, time. It requires mobilization of international opinion beyond where it is today. I think more needs to be done, and I think more will be done. I think, as you know, there will be a conference in June at the United Nations, I think co-sponsored by Saudi Arabia and France. We've been hearing now, finally, that the French and the British are moving towards recognition of a Palestinian state. I think all of these are important developments, and they would not have happened if it weren't for the Arab, I think, efforts with these countries and others. Having said that, that does not absolve them from doing more to help the Palestinians in a practical sense inside their territory. But that is the purpose of the negotiations we are conducting now between Hamas and Israel, is to put an end to this fighting, reach a ceasefire, allow humanitarian aid to go in, and ensure that the Palestinians, whether in Gaza or in the West Bank, remain on their land. And once we are able to do that, then we can start speaking of the political horizon for a Palestinian state.
Well, regarding the mobilization of international opinion and the support of the international community behind the Palestinian cause, now, would you be more specific, for instance, about what gains that have been made over a year and a half, for instance, in the Western Bloc, as well as the Global South, for instance? The Global South was normally more in favor of the Palestinians and the Arab cause.
I mean, I would, again, make a distinction between the situation on the ground for the Palestinians and the living conditions and how the international community is relating to the Palestinian question. Now you have, I believe, more than 140 countries recognize the Palestinian state, and I think there will be more taking place. I think the issue of how Israel is going about dealing with the Palestinians, whether in the West Bank or in Gaza, has been completely revealed to the international community, and not only governments, but I would put emphasis also on NGOs, on the youth, and all of that, I think, has shifted, I think, in a very measurable way since the events of October 7th. All of this helps, but is it sufficient? No, I think we need to do more. But I think in the sense that there is an increasing public opinion that is supportive of the Palestinians and their right to a state, clearly there has been. And I think that is a positive development.
How many Western governments have actually recognized the Palestinian state over the last year and a half?
I don't have the figure in front of me, but I think maybe
Spain and Ireland.
Yes, Spain, Ireland have done that. I'm not sure. Others have indicated, maybe in not a very direct manner, but I think in effect meant that they are supporting the Palestinian state, or they recognize the Palestinian state. Okay. So I think that in itself is important.
Now, let's move a bit to the other parts of the Middle East, for instance, regarding Syria. Now, first of all, your first comments on the downfall of the Assad regime or the Ba'ath regime in in Syria. And then the HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham's takeover of the country. Yeah. What was your first reaction when you saw that happen on the telly?
Well, I must say that I was not surprised that the Assad regime would come to an end. I think that was a matter of time. They had, unfortunately, mismanaged the situation from the first day, and the results we see. I mean, in terms of human lives being lost, the country being devastated, and so forth. I'm not surprised. The situation was not sustainable. I was surprised, like I think almost everybody, by the speed by which it happened and the way it happened. I think that was a surprise for everyone. But the fact that the regime would come to an end, I think, in my view, was a foregone conclusion. When I was working with the UN on this issue, it was a question of a soft landing, so to speak, how to manage a soft landing for the end of the regime to take place, with minimum dislocation to the Syrian people who had suffered for so long. Unfortunately, with the way things have happened, I think the vast majority of the Syrians are relieved, are in fact in a state of euphoria. But at the same time, their suffering has not been relieved. I mean, clearly they are now in a position where they are able to exercise freedoms in a much more concrete way than before. But the living conditions are extremely bad. The situation is extremely fragile, as we can see, whether it is in the coastal area or lately with the Druze in the south. The situation with the Kurds is not very good. So the situation in Syria is quite fragile, and I'm not sure if it can be sustained for very long.
Well, from a regional geopolitical point of view, would you agree that yes, the regime was unsustainable? The Bashar al-Assad regime was unsustainable, but at the same time, the result turned out to be a clear victory for Israel, or Israel has turned it into a victory for itself. You know, and then the country has become so, as you said, unsustainable. Would you agree with that largely?
Well, I mean, of course, Israel has used the pretext of HTS gaining power to drive a narrative that basically means that we have to protect our southern border, and we occupied more territory inside Syria. So yes, there is no doubt that Israel has used the developments to its advantage. But here is the question. I mean, it's not just Israel. I mean, you are from Turkey, and I can tell you, Turkey also.
I'll come to that.
Yeah, Turkey also has benefited from that. Now, whether Turkey and Israel have some tacit agreement initially or whatever, this is history will have to judge that. But clearly, both countries have benefited from what has happened in Syria. Israel has gone about it in a very aggressive manner. But I think here, Professor Ünal, we have to put things in the Israeli position in perspective. I mean, what Israel is doing in Syria is not different from what it's doing in Gaza or southern Lebanon or the West Bank. It is basically expanding a buffer zone around its territories and either controlling it directly or indirectly. So what is happening in Syria by the Israelis is really part of the design that Prime Minister Netanyahu has been putting forward, is in sense of redesigning, reshaping the Middle East to meet Israel's security interests, which I think is not the right way to do if you really want to coexist in peace with your neighbors.
Well, in terms of the Israeli buffer zone all around Israel, now Syria is too big a country for a buffer zone for Israel. So, as you also indicated, that Syria seems to be, dragging into some sort of perhaps civil war or turmoil. There's political turmoil all over the place. But is it your sense that a Syria of some sort can be maintained with all these, now the PKK, PYD in the northeast, trying to basically set up its own statelet over there, almost independent of Damascus, and then given the Alawite massacres and now what is happening with the Druze and the others, and then you have a radical jihadist, Islamist administration at the helm. What's going to happen?
Well, before I answer your question, I'd like to just refer to Israel, because you said Syria is too big for Israel to control. I agree with you. But I think what Israel is trying to do is have a buffer zone in southern Syria from from all the way from the Lebanese border, Mount Hermon, all the way through the Druze area. So that area. And so you're basically talking about south of Damascus. And they made it very clear. They said they won't allow the government to send forces to the south. So that, I think this is what the Israelis would like. If they do that, they think that this will keep Syria as a very weak state. And here I will come to answer your question. If you look at Syria today, it's quite interesting. And I would put it this way. There are three zones of influence. There is the area that the government has some sort of control over, which is from Aleppo through Damascus. And then you have the Turkish area, which is north and east of Aleppo. And then you have the Americans, who have influence over the eastern Euphrates and Tanf, which is on the Jordanian border. These are the areas of influence. But there are also areas of control. And you have three areas of influence, but you have about 6 or 7 areas of control, which are different. Yes, you have, if we start from the east, you have east of the Euphrates and just across the Euphrates. East of the Euphrates is controlled and administratively and otherwise by the Kurds. Just south of the Euphrates, where there's a majority Arabs, it's a different situation somewhat. Then you have the area around Aleppo, north and east of Aleppo, which are controlled by armed groups affiliated with Turkey. So now you have 3 areas. Then you have the Druze. Then you have the Southern Command, which is in Dara. Then you have the Alawites in the coastal area, which is the government has some control and influence, but not entirely. And then even if you look at Idlib, which is where HTS came from, it is ruled differently from Damascus. Then you have Damascus through Hama, Homs, and Aleppo. This is where the government more or less controls. So their areas of control are different. So is that conducive to stability? No. This has to be addressed, and it has to be addressed by, in my view, by helping the government and installing guardrails to make sure that it moves in the right direction. Now, we are receiving mixed signals from Damascus. Some are positive, and some are extremely worrying. And the only way to help them, in my view, is for the international community to play a more active role. On their own, I have my doubts if the present government will be able to maintain the territorial integrity and unity and rule Syria effectively. They need international support in different ways, without being completely intrusive. But we have to help them. We have to make them understand that nobody wants Syria to be a failed state, but also nobody wants Syria to be transformed into a radical Islamic state. And I don't think even the Syrian people want that. And so we have to make sure that happens. And the only way to do it is for international support to be provided on a conditional basis.
Well, on the question of unconditional basis of international support,
not unconditional, on a conditional basis.
On a conditional basis.
On a conditional.
And, well, okay, then would you agree with all the conditions the U.S. government has
No, this is different. Well, some of them, yes. I mean, you don't want foreign fighters to be in the Syrian army and to have leadership positions. There's no doubt about that. There is no doubt that you want all components. I don't like the word minority. All components of the Syrian society be included in determining the future of Syria. I think you need to have an inclusive government. Okay, the present government is certainly an improvement on the interim government, but I think there's still some way to go. So we need to see more from the present government. And one issue which has not been tackled yet, although they have talked about it, but has not been tackled yet, and I think it's absolutely critical for the future of Syria, is the issue of transitional justice. It has to be. I'm surprised that no practical steps have been taken so far. They've just announced a few things, but no practical steps. I think this is extremely important. It has to be a transparent process, and it has to be done according to international practice. Otherwise, it's not going to produce the kind of results that we are looking for.
Now, on the question of Syria again and the Arab world, there doesn't appear to be peace to outsiders like myself, although I follow the developments as closely as I can. There doesn't appear to be a Arab League consensus about what they want with regard to Syria. Apart from the usual statements that everybody wants a Syria remaining intact and all that. Do you see differences in their approaches?
Well, I would see that, yes, there are differences, but I don't think there are major differences in the sense that some countries, let's take, for example, on one extreme, you have Qatar, who is invested in and therefore they are prepared to do very much to help the present government. Although I hear that there are some difficulties of late between Doha and Damascus, but in general, they are the most forthcoming. Then you have other Arab states in the Gulf that do not want Syria to be left on its own. There is the experience of Iraq, if you remember. The Arab world turned its back to Iraq for 20 years, and the result was Iran increased its influence, and it has been an uphill battle for the Arab countries to improve relations with with Iraq. So I don't think anyone wants that to happen in Syria. But I don't think there is complete support for if Syria were to move towards an Islamic radical state. So I think that is the fine line you have to ensure, and that's why I'm saying you have to have guardrails to ensure that Syria does not veer to radicalism. And that requires, before anything else, I think, improving the economic situation for the Syrian people. And that the Arabs are in a unique position to do that. I don't think anyone else is prepared to help Syria economically as much as the Arabs are capable, as much as the Arabs are. But again, like I said, it has to be conditional. It has to be conditional. You have to have work towards an inclusive society. You have to provide for freedom of expression, allow political parties to be formed. I mean, all of this, I'm not talking about democracy overnight, but you have to establish the building blocks for democracy. And hopefully this will be the case if the international community is engaged with Syria.
Or at least there has to be a Syrian government which would include all these components, as you put it, of the Syrian society in the governance. Otherwise, people would feel totally estranged and ostracized and left out, wouldn't they?
Well, obviously, I mean, if you ask the Syrian government today, they will tell you, well, it is inclusive because we have a Kurd, we have a Druze, we have Christian, we have one woman who's also Christian, and therefore we are inclusive. Well, I mean, compared to the interim government that we had before, it is a step forward, but it is far, far, in my view, from what an inclusive government should look like. So I think there is room for improvement there. There are some very good people that I know personally in the cabinet, and I wish them success. But it remains that HTS holds all the critical ministries, and that is very dangerous.
Yes. And the HTS, with all its radical Islamist baggage, that is going to remain as a big question mark, I think, over Syria in the months and perhaps years ahead. And now, on the question of Egypt's approach to Syria, how did is there an Egyptian position as to what sort of a Syria Cairo would like to see?
Oh, obviously. We would like to see a unified Syria, a strong Syria, because that is critical for Arab security and regional security. We would like to see a Syria that represents all Syrians, all walks of life. Clearly, and I think that is obvious, we would not like to have a radical Islamic government in Syria. This is not just Egypt, but I think most Arab countries would not like that.
And regarding Turkey's involvement, whether it is ephemeral or whether it is real, it is disputable. But the outsiders seem to conclude that Turkey has a lot of influence over what's happening in Syria, although people like myself who have been critical of Turkish government's handling of its Middle Eastern policies, particularly Syria and all that. So we don't see that in that light. But how do you see it yourself, and how does Egypt perceives it, in your view?
Well, let me put it this way. One cannot deny that Turkey has interests in Syria. It has interests all over the Arab world, but in particular Syria as a neighboring country. And their interests are not just economic, they are primarily, I think, security. And I think there is room for Arab countries and Turkey to reach an arrangement by which they will cooperate on Syria, help Syria transition to a much better Syria than in the past or in the present. And I think that is critical. I think the Arabs cannot do it on their own, neither can Turkey do it on its own. And therefore, cooperation, in my view, is very important. But at the end of the day, Syria is an Arab country. Its interests are more aligned with the Arab world, and it is something that Turkey needs to understand. The fact that it has security interests in securing its southern border is understandable. It has economic interests, that's fine. But beyond that, having influence on the governance in Syria, I think this is something that is not in the long-term interests of Syria, and certainly not of Turkey.
And one last point in our tour d'horizon, that is Egypt's relations with Greek Cyprus and mainland Greece. It used to be very close to both when the Turco-Egyptian relations were at the lowest level, of which we talked quite a bit between you and me at the Valdai, and how to, contribute to the improvement of the relations between Egypt and Turkey. And since the relations were normalized, it seems to me, from my side, that Egypt has also normalized its relations with Greek Cyprus and mainland Cyprus. It used to be almost on the same basis as it used to be before all this Turco-Egyptian brawl, if you like, from 2013 to almost 20. Now, is that also your sense, that Egypt has basically maneuvered back to where it should be in terms of Turco-Greek dispute in the Eastern Mediterranean?
Well, let me put it this way. We have always maintained balanced relations between Turkey and Greece. That has been the tradition. With Turkey, there have been ups and downs historically, Nasser's time and so on. But in general, we have always maintained a very stable, balanced relationship between Turkey and Greece. The fact that it appeared that our relationship with Greece had improved and that of Turkey deteriorated was not because of us. It was because of Turkish policy. Now, once Turkey decided to normalize with Egypt, things went back to normal. I think that's the normal state of things. We share with Turkey a lot more than we share with Greece, and therefore a balance is the normal thing, and I think that should be maintained through the interests of both countries.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. I think with that we can conclude, and thank you very much for joining me on in our strategic compass, and hope to see you in person somewhere. At least, I look forward to seeing you in person, at least maybe in the Valdai Forum again.
Well, maybe when I come to Turkey, I will look you up.
Oh, if you do, yes, please do.
I will do that.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much again, and bye-bye for now.
Bye. Goodbye.